Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to just imagine for a second looking at the last 5,000 years of human history
Right.
and deciding that every single foundational institution we rely on is not just, slightly flawed.
Right. Like it needs a little fixing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But instead deciding that it is the direct, undeniable cause of all human suffering. And then taking it a step further, deciding the only logical path forward is to completely erase every single one of them.
It's just a staggering premise when you lay it out like that.
It really is.
I mean, we are talking about a blueprint for a world where nations, money, laws, and even traditional families are entirely dismantled. And this is all based on the idea that they are the very things keeping humanity in a state of misery.
It's like when you decide to renovate a house, right? There's usually a moment of hesitation. You look at a wall and you think, can I just paint over this, maybe patch the drywall?
Yeah, you really want to avoid bringing out the sledgehammer.
Exactly, because tearing down load-bearing walls is chaotic. It's messy. But this deep dive isn't about patching drywall.
No, definitely not.
The document we have in front of us looks at the foundation of human civilization, points out the rot, and basically says the whole thing just has to come down.
Which is exactly what makes this such an incredibly fascinating text to analyze. We are looking at a highly radical document today. It's titled The Future of Humanity, Xiufeng-Style Communism, written by Xiufeng in March 2024 and translated by Kinyu.
Right, but before we get into the actual mechanics of how this would even work, we need to establish some ground rules for you listening.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because this source contains highly charged political, social, and philosophical concepts. Our mission here is not to endorse these views, nor are we here to condemn them. We are acting entirely as your impartial guides today.
Absolutely. We're just going to unpack the source material so you can fully understand the ideas being proposed, regardless of where you personally fall on the political or philosophical spectrum.
We are just here to examine the blueprint. And to understand the proposed solution, we really have to start where the author starts, which is the diagnosis of the past 5 millennia.
Yeah, the diagnosis is intense.
The text looks across Europe, Africa, Asia, the Americas, and Oceania, and claims that history is defined by a very specific, unchanging set of conditions, right?
Yeah.
War, hunger, disease, turmoil, and natural disasters.
Right. And the author makes a sweeping, absolute claim here. I mean, the text explicitly states that no nation, and in fact, no individual, has ever lived a life entirely filled with joy, happiness, freedom, and bliss.
That is a brutally heavy assessment of the human condition.
It is.
But,
Yeah.
the text doesn't just point out the suffering. It identifies the culprits. It points directly at 5 pillars of human society.
Yeah, and those 5 pillars are nations, religions, political parties, money, and power.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this because that is basically the entire structure of modern life.
It is, and here's where the author's logic really locks in. The historical facts, according to the document, prove that these 5 pillars haven't solved our suffering.
Right. Okay.
More importantly, the text argues they actively compound the misery. So money creates artificial scarcity and hoarding.
Oh, sure.
Power creates hierarchy and oppression. And nations create borders and wars.
So the deduction the author makes is purely mathematical at this point.
Yeah.
If these 5 things cause the suffering, the only logical solution is absolute eradication.
Exactly. Total deletion.
Nations must disappear. Religions must vanish. Political parties must cease. Money must be eliminated, and power must be entirely eradicated.
It is a massive conceptual leap. The author isn't asking for reform here. They are demanding a total uninstallation of society's operating system.
Okay, I love that. Let's run with that computer analogy because it really helps clarify the scale of this. Think of human civilization as a computer operating system that has been running continuously for 5,000 years.
It's going to be pretty buggy.
Extremely buggy. It is so utterly corrupted with viruses, malware, and glitches that you can't just, download a security patch.
Right.
You can't just update to a new version. The text is essentially saying you have to completely wipe the hard drive. You have to format the entire system down to 0.
Yes. The hard drive must be wiped clean for humanity to have any future at all. That is the foundational argument of the text.
But wait, if we wipe the hard drive, if we just delete money, erase all borders so there are no nations, and remove all power structures,
Yeah.
wouldn't the system just crash entirely?
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you take away the rules, the borders, and the economy, it seems incredibly likely we would just regress straight back into the Stone Age or, fragment into warring tribal city-states fighting over resources.
Well, the text actually anticipates that exact fear. It's the most natural objection to anarchy or the dissolution of structure. But the author answers it with a firm no.
No.
No, they argue that a regression to primitive eras or tribal times is impossible now,
Why is it impossible?
specifically because of the evolution of human consciousness.
How does the text define this evolution? Because from where I'm sitting, humanity still looks pretty prone to tribalism.
Well, the argument rests on the idea that humanity's overall cognitive baseline has fundamentally shifted. Our technology has advanced, our thinking has become far more dynamic, and our collective knowledge has reached unprecedented heights.
Okay.
Because we have attained this elevated cognitive state, the author claims the actual desire to regress simply doesn't exist anymore.
To put it another way, the text is kind of saying we have fundamentally outgrown the need for those older restrictive systems.
Precisely.
Like, we needed the training wheels of nations and money to get us to this level of technological advancement, but now they're just dragging us down.
That's a great way to look at it. And the author actually makes a very specific, and I'd say quite surprising, comparison to illustrate this point.
What's the comparison?
The text argues that humanity as a whole will no longer wish to regress to the past, much in the same way that an increasing number of individuals today are reluctant to enter what the text calls marital and familial hardships.
Wait, really? That is a fascinating parallel to draw.
It is.
So, just as modern individuals might look at the traditional nuclear family structure and say,
Yeah.
you know what, this feels too restrictive for my personal autonomy, humanity is looking at the concept of a nation and feeling the exact same way.
Yeah, the underlying sentiment is about outgrowing overarching systems of control.
Right.
The author is suggesting that just as societal expectations around marriage are evolving, our planetary expectations around governance must evolve. A species with our level of dynamic wisdom simply doesn't need to be micromanaged by borders and currency anymore.
Okay, I hear the philosophy, but this brings up a huge practical contradiction for you, the listener, to consider.
Go for it.
Our current, unprecedented high levels of technology and knowledge, the very things the author says prevent us from regressing, were largely funded by money.
Right.
They were organized by nations, protected by laws, and driven by political and economic competition. How does the text propose we maintain global server farms, advanced medicine, or space exploration without the very infrastructure that built them in the first place?
That is the million-dollar question. Well, pardon the pun, since money wouldn't exist.
Good one.
But this transition leads us directly into the core of Shui Feng's proposed new system. If we don't go backward into tribalism and we don't keep the current infrastructure, what does the daily reality of moving forward actually look like?
Right.
The text calls this destination the era of Life Tianyuan. It's also referred to as Shui Feng-style communism, or the kingdom of the greatest creator.
The era of Life Tianyuan. What does that term actually signify in this context?
Conceptually, Life Tianyuan blends the idea of life with a courtyard, an origin, or a paradise. It envisions a global Eden where all the macrostructures are gone.
Okay.
But the text goes much further. It erases the microstructures as well. In this era, there are no constitutions, there are no laws, and there are absolutely no regulations.
Wait, so if we take away the macrostructures, you're saying the microstructures go too?
All of them.
That means ripping up every legal document, every local ordinance, down to the family unit itself. Because following up on that earlier comparison, the text explicitly states there will be no marriages or traditional families either.
Yep, none at all.
That is a complete dismantling of how human beings organize themselves. How does anyone know what to do on a Tuesday morning without laws, jobs, or family units?
Well, instead of external laws or regulations enforcing behavior, individuals adhere to a shared internalized set of values. Resources are no longer hoarded or partitioned by families or nations. They are shared worldwide. The text describes a state where everyone possesses nothing, yet owns everything.
Possesses nothing, yet owns everything. That sounds poetic, but how does it work mechanically?
The philosophical engine driving this is the concept of mind over matter. The text literally states, all material phenomena are the outcomes of consciousness. The essence of the world lies in the formless manifestations.
Oh, I see. So the author is suggesting that our physical reality, like poverty, crime, the necessity for a police force, is all just a projection of our current flawed selfish consciousness.
Yes, exactly. If you elevate the collective consciousness to a state of complete selflessness, the material world automatically reflects that harmony.
Wow.
The vision is of individuals coming together to create what the author calls the most magnificent symphony of life.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I like to picture this as an honor system library, but scaled up to the entire planet.
Okay, I like that.
An honor system library only works if every single person who walks through the doors completely agrees on the internal rules, values the books, and respects the community. You don't need a security guard checking bags at the door if the consciousness of the patrons is perfectly aligned with the concept of sharing.
That's spot on. The security guard is the law, the constitution, the power structure. In Life Genuine, the shared values replace the need for the guard entirely.
But I have to ask the obvious question about the library metaphor. Who pays the electric bill for the library?
Right.
Who sweeps the floors? If there is no money and no law compelling you to work, why would anyone clean the bathrooms in this global society?
Well, the text argues that in this state of elevated consciousness, work is no longer a burden performed for a wage. Because everyone possesses nothing yet owns everything, maintenance of the community becomes a collective joy.
A collective joy to clean bathrooms.
Exactly. You clean the bathroom because it is your bathroom and everyone else's. And honestly, the author is highly self-aware of the skepticism this invites.
I would hope so.
Yeah, the text directly asks, can't imagine it, impossible.
And I imagine the author says it is, in fact, possible.
They do. The text answers that in the universe, nothing is truly impossible. But more importantly, the author doesn't just rely on abstract theory here.
Oh.
The text asserts that this future is backed by a real-world practical model called the second home.
A working prototype of this society.
A working prototype that, according to the text, started in April 2009. The author claims it has been successfully running for 15 years.
15 years. That is a massive claim. We are talking about a community operating for a decade and a half without traditional laws, without money, and without the nuclear family.
Right.
Does the text explain how the second home actually manages its day-to-day existence?
It points to the overarching principles at play. In this community, because private property and traditional marriages are abolished, the community itself becomes the family unit.
I see.
Resources go into a central pool. By removing the friction of individuals hoarding wealth for their specific offspring or spouses, the community ostensibly operates in total harmony. The author actually challenges skeptics by stating there is a wealth of textual, visual, and video proof accessible online to verify this 15-year experiment.
So the argument is essentially, don't take my word for it, look at the proof we've generated in the real world.
Exactly.
Okay, let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that this prototype is as successful as the text claims. It functions perfectly without money or laws. That brings up a glaring contradiction. If it's so successful, and it fundamentally cures human suffering, why has the entire globe adopted it? Why are 8 billion people still living under the weight of nations and currency?
And this is where we hit the final and undoubtedly the most difficult hurdle outlined in the text.
Okay, what is it?
Transitioning the rest of the globe into this Shufeng-style communist lifestyle requires something monumental. The author states that all of humanity must first undergo a profound spiritual purification.
A profound spiritual purification for 8 billion people. That is, well, daunting.
It's massive. The text freely acknowledges that it is a monumental and challenging undertaking. It describes this global psychological shift as the construction of the human soul garden.
The human soul garden. Building a garden implies careful cultivation, but, it also implies a lot of weeding.
The weeding is the entire point. The main task of building this soul garden is identifying and entirely uprooting negative and pessimistic psychological elements from the human heart. The text actually provides a very specific list of the traits that must be eradicated for this society to function.
So what does this all mean? What are the weeds we have to pull?
The elements that must be uprooted are greed, jealousy, comparison, selfishness, laziness, complaints, hatred, and ego.
Wow. That is extreme mental landscaping. The text isn't just asking us to change how we vote or how we spend money.
No, not at all.
It is demanding that we reach into the soil of the human mind and permanently pull out psychological traits that have existed alongside humanity for the entire 5,000 years of recorded history.
They are incredibly deep roots. Modern psychology often views things like ego, comparison, and selfishness as baseline survival mechanisms.
Exactly.
The text is asking humanity to transcend its own biological and psychological conditioning. Because without pulling those weeds, your honor system library falls apart. If even a fraction of the population retains greed or laziness, the unselfish society collapses.
I want to push back on this list of weeds, because this raises a critical question for the listener about human nature itself. Let's look at comparison, complaints, and ego. Can we actually uproot those without also uprooting human ambition?
How do you mean?
Well, think about innovation. So much of our technological advancement, the very technology the author says proves our high cognitive level, was driven by friction.
Right.
It was driven by someone looking at the world, complaining that it wasn't good enough, comparing their work to a competitor's, and having the sheer ego to think they could build something better. If you remove all complaints and all comparison, do you accidentally remove the engine of human progress?
It is a profound question. The text seems to imply that in the era of life genuine, the very motivation for creation fundamentally shifts.
How so?
It is no longer driven by friction, the desire to outdo a competitor or personal ego. It is driven purely by selflessness. When you possess nothing but own everything, your contribution to the world isn't for personal glory, it is for the sheer harmony of the whole.
So instead of inventing a new medical device because you want to be rich or famous,
Yeah.
you invent it simply because it elevates the collective joy of the community.
Precisely. It requires a total rewiring of what motivates a human being to get out of bed in the morning. The author insists this spiritual purification is the mandatory gateway. You cannot have the frictionless society until the inner friction of the human soul is completely resolved.
It is just a breathtakingly sweeping vision. Let's synthesize the journey we've just taken through this document for everyone listening.
Sure.
We started with a radical diagnosis that 5,000 years of human history, plagued by suffering across all continents, proves that our macro institutions, nations, religions, parties, money, and power are fundamentally broken and must be deleted.
Yep. And then we explored the author's argument that our cognitive and technological evolution ensures we won't regress to primitive tribalism. The text compared our growth beyond these macrosystems to a modern reluctance to engage in the microsystem of traditional marriage.
Which led us to the proposed destination, right? The era of life genuine. A society with no laws, no money, and no family units, where resources are shared globally based on an elevated consciousness. A concept the author claims isn't just theory, but is proven by the 15-year success of the second home experiment.
Right. And finally, we examined the immense prerequisite for this utopia, the construction of the human soul garden. This requires uprooting deeply ingrained traits like ego, jealousy, comparison, and complaints from the collective human heart to achieve total harmony.
It is a massive amount of philosophical weight to process.
It truly is. And if we look at the bigger picture, whether one views Huifeng's vision as a brilliant, necessary roadmap for human survival or as an impossible utopian fantasy, the text serves a highly valuable purpose.
Yeah, I agree.
It acts as a mirror. It forces us to ask ourselves if our current societal structures are truly serving our highest potential or if they are simply managing our inherent flaws. It challenges the assumption that the way we live now is inevitable.
That is the real value of doing a deep dive into radical source material like this. It completely stretches the boundaries of what we consider possible. But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder. Something that builds on that debate we just had about the human soul garden.
Oh, I'm curious.
If a society actually manages to achieve total harmony by completely uprooting the ego, by removing all jealousy and eliminating all comparison, by wiping it all out, does it finally eliminate human suffering? Or, in pulling out all those psychological weeds, does it accidentally eliminate the very friction that makes us uniquely human in the first place? If every single person is perfectly selfless, and everyone is playing flawlessly in this new symphony of life, who is writing the music?
Now that is a thought to leave on.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.